the decisions we made, not only going down passive house, but also the embodied carbon of the building reflected in the build as a whole, and then also our reputation. All those pillars came into the decision to go down that passive house route. Rewarding, but it's been challenging at the same time because we pushed the boundaries around the architectural side of the office.
Welcome to the Passive House podcast, brought to you by Passive House Accelerator, a catalyst for zero carbon building. For news, inspiration, and connections from all flavours of Passive House, check out passivehouseaccelerator.com. Sign up to receive regular updates about events, get your questions answered, and contribute to the community dialogue. There's loads of free information for experienced professionals and people just starting out on their Passive House journey. We hope to see you at one of our weekly Passive House Accelerator live webinars. You can also check out our Reimagined Buildings YouTube channel for some great inspiration for both building new or renovating. In the meantime, here's this week's Passive House podcast. Kia ora koutou. My name's Matthew Cutler-Welsh and welcome to the Passive House podcast, coming to you from Tamaki Makaurau here in Auckland, New Zealand.
And I'm Zach Semke, coming to you from Seattle, Washington.
How's things in Seattle, Zach?
Things are good in Seattle. I learned something new this week. Did you learn anything new this week?
I did. I did learn something interesting. You want to go first?
Okay. So I just saw the TED Talk that just got released by Hannah Ritchie. Hannah Ritchie is one of my favorite thinkers and data crunchers around the climate crisis and climate action. She's with Our World in Data. And the title of her talk is, Are We the Last Generation or the First Sustainable One? I highly recommend this TED Talk. So just one snippet and a piece of learning that I had. I knew that the UK was something of a success story. It's all relative, of course, but something of a success story in terms of decarbonization. But this struck me, and that is that she said, and she's probably, my guess is that she's like 40 or late 30s, maybe. She said that today, the per capita CO2 emissions in the UK is less than half of what it was in her grandparents' time. And that's in the midst of all sorts of economic growth that's been happening in the UK. There's been a really dramatic decrease in the per capita CO2 emissions. And lest you think that's all about just offshoring CO2 emissions to other countries, like China, for example, in manufacturing, when you adjust for trade, it's still very, very significant reductions in carbon. And this is part of a larger trend of decoupling of economic growth with carbon emissions per capita across all sorts of industrialized countries. So there's some progress.
What was the starting date of that comparison?
Well, I mean, I'm looking at a graph right here, and maybe I can do a screenshot of this graph. But I mean, her grandparents' time was probably mid-century, I'll say in 1900. This is I'm sure more like great grandparents' time. In 1900, the CO2 emissions per person in the UK were 10 tons, and today they are 5 tons. And so in the 1950s, they went up to considerably higher than 10 tons. So that's probably when she was measuring. And coal, of course, has gone from the by far the most significant source of energy in the UK to now to 2% or less than 2% of energy production in the UK. So that's a big part of it, of all this.
Yeah. Of course, that doesn't mean emissions are going down, right?
Well, total emissions are going down in the UK. Yeah.
They are going down.
Yep. Yeah. But they certainly aren't going down in the rest of the world. And so there's all sorts of, it's not that this is some sort of Pollyanna kind of view of things, but she goes into both the massive challenges that we have and also the places to look for the real progress, and makes the case that we can become the first sustainable generation. So this is all, and what's cool about her work is that it's all very based in data. And so you can take a look at that data and see what you think, and we can all make our own assessments. But it's a really well done piece. I think it clocks in at less than 15 minutes. Lots of really great insights.
Really cool. Yeah, I mean, World in Data, ourworldindata.org, pretty amazing site. I think I certainly found out about that site and looked at it quite regularly during COVID, because it had some very interesting things to track there. But there's a huge amount of information on there, and really easy to interrogate that data as well and have a look. And I have just clicked on the United Kingdom annual CO2 emissions. It goes right back to 1750, and that's trucking down at the tail end of that right hand side of that graph. It is has gone well down, probably back to sort of 1890 levels now. So that's pretty impressive after peaking at when was the worst? It's sort of 1970.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Interesting. So there's hope. That's Hannah's message?
Yeah, but it's that, how do you define hope? Hope has to be defined as we're gonna work our butts off together to build the future we want.
Well, changing tack slightly, in my day job, I get to look at sustainability, but also building science. And we've been asked to do a little bit of a project looking at some designs of homes in some Pacific islands. Now, the New Zealand government has or assists some countries, some very small countries in the Pacific, and indeed we have some programs where some of our government officials are in those areas, places like Fiji, Niue, and Kiribati. I had to look up where Kiribati was. It's a name I'd heard of. It's very close to the equator. It's very far north almost directly north of New Zealand. And we managed to find some climate files. We've had some external experts, some of whom would be familiar to this audience, interrogate that data for us and look at what that would mean for the design of energy efficient, healthy, comfortable homes in that climate. And that's a pretty extreme climate. When we talk about extreme climates in relation to passive house, we often think about really, really cold climates. But this is really close to the equator. And that has lots of implications for heating demand, but there basically is none. But there is a cooling demand if you want to maintain temperatures in Celsius between 20 and 25 degrees throughout the year, because the ambient temperature doesn't very often go below mid to high 20s in Kiribati. The biggest challenge, though, is the humidity. And a line of the data that really stood out to me in Kiribati was the dew point. So that's a combination of temperature and humidity, and it's the temperature at which any time of the year, if you go below that temperature, then you'll reach condensation. And it doesn't go below about 24 degrees for the whole year. So that's the average. There'll be slight daily change, but not a lot. But basically what that means, that's around mid-70s Fahrenheit. If you bring in ambient air into your internal environment and you drop it down to around 23, 24 degrees, sort of mid-70s Fahrenheit, you will get condensation. So that means that the big focus for controlling that internal environment has got to be around, you've got to have dehumidification, basically. There's not really any way of managing that just through reducing thermal bridging and bringing in fresh air, because fresh air is going to contribute to that problem. So you've got to run some sort of dehumidification. So that's an extreme example, but it is also interesting when we look at places like Auckland here in New Zealand and Northland. We're a bit further north, it's warmer, but we are surrounded by water, and there are lots of other places in the country that are starting to look now at passive house and ways to reduce the carbon of the operational carbon of buildings and the energy efficiency, but also the health. And we can't achieve healthy, comfortable internal conditions without really paying attention to that internal moisture and how we reduce the likelihood of condensation occurring. So don't have a solution, but I just thought that was a very interesting data point, and we could look at that building science and then come up with solutions of how to manage that.
Excellent, and that's also, I think, timely in terms of the upcoming FIASCon conference in Houston, which I think will have a lot of focus on how to practice in very humid contexts.
And very warm, dealing with the heat, and looking at the design of these buildings. They're characterized by really big eaves, lots of shading, trying to just keep that heat out as long as you can, but also addressing the demand for cooling and dehumidification as well. So I really look forward to some of those conversations, because I know there's some really good thinking about what passive house looks like in those warmer, more humid climates. Good stuff. Now, we've got a great interview to listen to this week, but before we do that, let's thank our sponsors.
Yeah, so everything we do at the Accelerator, including Passive House Podcast, comes thanks to support from these fine organizations. So a big thank you to our founding sponsors, 475 High Performance Building Supply, Baxtingui Architects, Glavel, Minutair, Mitsubishi Electric Train HVAC US, Partel, Rockwell North America, Stocorp, and Zola Windows. Thanks as well to our champion sponsors, Bewizo, Gradient, Icon Windows and Doors, Intelligent Membranes, PH Air Seal, Proseco, and Source 2050. And a big shout out to our stakeholder partner, NYSERDA, the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority.
All right. Well, I first heard about the Dunlop hub from a post. There was multiple people that posted about this project. I think Elron Burrell might have done a post, Jonathan Holmes and Jason Quinn. They've all been involved, as is the way with some of these more interesting projects here in New Zealand, that we tend to get the usual suspects all doing their part and having some input into the either design or the consultation or the certification of these projects. This one made the headlines because it's been cited as the first certified passive house office building in New Zealand. So it's a workshop, showroom, office space of Dunlop Builders. And I caught up with Bryce Dunlop recently to have a chat about what he does and how he came to build the first certified passive house office building. I have Bryce Dunlop coming to us from Wanaka. How are things in Wanaka?
Yeah, pretty good. We're right in the midst of winter at the moment. Town's buzzing. We've got Cardrona and Treble Cone. You're starting to get a little bit of snow. We always need more, but I think when we get a lot of snow, we always need more as well. So it's in a pretty good. Town has a real buzz about it in winter, and it's a good place to be.
It's a beautiful place to be. How's Wanaka going in terms of population these days? Is it because it went through a bit of a growth spurt? Is that still continuing?
It sure is. Yeah, I think the growth spurt's more rapid than what it ever has. I suppose it's exponential. Like when we first moved here 20 odd years ago, I think the population was around 3,500, but don't quote me on this, but we're looking at around 15 to 20 at the moment. So,
and does that go up and down quite a lot with the seasons when you get an influx of tourists?
Yeah, it's a holiday destination, so it's a bit of a hotspot. Domestic tourism is quite strong in Wanaka, probably more so than Queenstown. You get a lot of internationals over the hill, but there's a lot of holiday homes here. People are quite prepared to invest in homes, and a lot of the builds that we do for either holiday homes or even more recently, people who have got the intent to move here at some stage and looking at getting established early on in their journey.
Yeah. So how did you get involved in building in the first place?
It's a bit of a long story, that one. A third generation builder. My grandfather started in the mid-40s after the war. He was based in Wellington, and right through that era of the State House, New Zealand State Houses, the government incentive builds, he built 450 houses around the Greater Wellington region over a 40-year period. And then my father, Dad got into the commercial side of building in Wellington, and then was quite successful with it. Worked his way right up into project management, and then consequently ended up in Australia, where I spent a lot of my childhood on commercial projects over there, and then they set their own business up. And then we moved back to Nelson, and it was in 1992 that I started my apprenticeship in building. And there was just an urge for me to get into construction. It's just what I wanted to do. Whether or not it had to be influenced by what I saw growing up with mum and dad's business and what granddad was achieving as well at that time.
Yeah. I imagine they weren't building passive houses though, or did they have a sort of bent towards sustainability?
Not really. They're different eras. We're talking about the mid 40s through to the early 80s. Not many people in New Zealand, in fact, not many people in the world would have probably known what a passive house was through that stage, and that's reflective in the type of buildings and the lack of insulation, etc. But that was just the norm at the time. The commercial sector, what Dad was quite heavily involved with in his career, it's not wasn't on their radar. That was in the 80s, 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
And then for myself, getting set up, even in the early days, my apprenticeship, and even in early days in business, we weren't aware of passive house or what that even looked at, or even airtight design. So it's just something that, like for us as a company, we've evolved into that, and it had a real awareness around the environment, and that's what's driven us more into that passive house and performance and environmental side of building.
Where's that come from for you?
I think it's evolved over time. It's not something that happens straight away. Like I've been in construction for 30 years, and we've had the business. Dunlop Builders has been operating for 20 of those years. But we've been in the game for a long time, and there's triggers that happen on your journey that influence you. I've always had an open mind, always wanted to. I think that probably stems back from my apprenticeship. I did my apprenticeship with a guy that was really innovative, always looking at different ways to do things, different methods in construction. And I think that probably unlocked myself to really try to push those boundaries and always do better. And that's pushed me around living in it probably goes back to living in Wanaka as well. We live in quite a diverse climate where we've got extreme heat in the summer, and then we've got quite extreme cold in the winter. So just having all that awareness, all those pieces to the puzzle along our journey has got us to a point probably about 10 to 12 years ago that we really started to think, how can we make homes that we build warmer? And then we've just evolved from then to start off more around airtight type of construction, and then more recently into passive certified builds. So that performance has been a driver through a lot of influences over career, and then in business, and then more lately really getting well educated around passive homes, performance, and how much better they are for your own well-being, as well as the environmental side of construction as well.
And you've trained up quite a lot of your team now. They're passive house tradespeople.
Yep. So we've got 5 passive house tradespeople in the team, and we'll be putting more through it this year. There's so much value in not the certification as such, but just that education that goes around learning about what needs to go into a passive house, and then the performance that generates with what we do on site, and how much of a value that is to the people that we build for.
How do you communicate that value? Because it's got to cost more as well.
Yeah. When you take a path where you want to specialise in something quite specific, it seems to attract people around you that like to do the same. And when you look at the architects that we align ourselves with, their performance side of building is quite high up on their list of priorities. Yep. So they probably the first step is the driver behind it. So when you've got an architect that specialises in either passive house design or around the performance side of building, they're attracting clients that are like-minded as well. So you're collaborating with people that are on a similar pathway, and it's quite an easy one, because it's by the time they've come to us or we're working at an early stage, they've already got that on their radar and feel quite strongly about that side of building.
Right. So you tend to attract clients who already know a bit about passive house and then know that that's what they want.
Yeah.
As opposed to having to try and convince people.
Yes. Yeah. Quite often that's the case. And interestingly, when we look at it, I've just looked through some spreadsheets. We record our builds, and more recent people are becoming more and more educated around building, and previously they might have been looking at the aesthetics of building, but now they're really looking at the performance side of building as well. And there's drivers out there, like you've got your environmental drivers, you've got your energy costs, you've got a whole raft of things that people are doing their own research, and we've got that. There's so much more available for people to do their own research when they go into the design stage as well. So the majority, there's a bigger pool out there, and there's more and more people wanting to go down this route.
Yeah.
It's quite an exciting stage as a building company to be at. Like, we've done a lot of work, we've got ourselves in a really good position. The market's changing. There's a lot more awareness out there around performance and energy usage in buildings, and
it is exciting. It can't have been easy to get there, though. How was it doing the first passive house project?
The first passive house project. So just a little bit of a summary of the experience that we've got in Wanaka. We've built 67 homes in Wanaka over the last 20 years. 17 have been airtight and 3 have been passive certified. And we've got one going through the design stage at the moment. That's a passive certified house as well. So the first airtight house that we did was a SIP panel house, and that was in 2016. So that was, when you look back over your history, that was probably a turning point into getting our way of thinking around more performance side of building. And just the feedback that you get through clients after you finish the build, and just how comfortable those spaces are to live in, and the air quality. And you can feel it when you walk into those buildings as well, with mechanical ventilation. And that's what sparks stuff for us. And when you get a passion for something, it drives you to want to do better and better. And we're very good at it as a company, and we're always trying to do things. There's always a better way to do something, and that's what that's the path that we've gone down.
Did you have any struggle with the concept of airtightness? Because I imagine that's not something you learnt in your apprenticeship.
Not at all. Not when you learn. Like anything, like any change, you question it, right? And Kiwis traditionally have been quite slow to adapt to change. And that's the same in construction. Like, we're very set in our ways, and we're doing things that we did 50, 60, 70 years ago still. And we know that wasn't good enough. So I think that probably goes back to my apprenticeship and really being open, travelled a lot, living in a beautiful place like Wanaka, where we want to see change because it needs to happen. You'd be pretty ignorant to not realise that we need to make change, and not the way that we live, the way that we build, the decisions that we make. We've got to have the environment at the forefront of those decisions. So for us, it was quite easy because we as a company want to be part of that change, and we want to be one of the drivers behind that change as well.
Yeah. So tell us about your Dunlop hub.
Right. Yeah, this has been quite the journey as well. So the Dunlop hub, it's Passive House certified. It's got Passive House Plus certification. We've got quite an array of solar panels, which are the renewable energy side of it. We've got 10.5 kilowatts of panels on the roof. And it goes back to the journey. And one of the key drivers behind this, I'll mention it. It would have been about 5 years ago. We wanted to identify ourselves, and we came up with the concept of we wanted to come up with the Dunlop Builders philosophy. So the philosophy is a document that we deep down we knew what we were about, but we couldn't express it verbally. So we did a lot of work. It took us 6 to 8 months of working on this document, which it needed to reflect who we are, so we could share that with our staff, we could share it with our clients, we could share it with anyone, and then on the outside, they could see this document or see our philosophy and go, yeah, that's them. It identifies who we are. So the key pillars of that philosophy are reputation. So it takes good experience to earn a good name. Mastery, which is being the best, means always trying to be better. Home is building a better future for our community, Wanaka. And responsibility, which is caring for our work, our team, and the environment. We own it. So when we set out to go through this design of our hub, we wanted the hub to reflect who we are as a company and to reflect our philosophy. So we essentially built the Dunlop hub around our philosophy, which probably might sound a little bit floaty, but when you stand in the hub, it does represent who we are as a company. So one of the drivers behind us going down that passive house route was around the environmental side of building. It was around our staff and our people, because we really wanted a good environment to work in, and we knew when we went through the design that passive house, passive certified homes have a great indoor environment, and we wanted it to look good as well. So we brought in a real good mix of architecture, who we got. We engaged with Pack Studios, architect that we work with in Auckland on a few projects down here, and then we also needed to get some other consultants like Elron from Via Architecture, Jonathan Holmes, to piece it all together. So the architecture brought out the mastery. So we wanted to showcase our work. It's been very well finished. It reflects the architectural work that we do. We wanted a home that our staff could come to that felt like home and a good warming environment. And the responsibility for our environment, like the decisions we made, not only going down passive house, but also the embodied carbon of the building is reflected in the build as a whole, and then also our reputation as well. So all of those pillars came into the decision to go down that passive house route. And I tell you what, there's been no regrets by going through this journey to get where we are. It's been rewarding, but it's been challenging at the same time because we pushed the boundaries around the architectural side of the office.
Just to get, I mean, I've got the benefit of scrolling through some photos here, but just to give people the benefit who are listening, it's basically a big shed, but with a stunning office kind of protruding out of it, and it does have a beautiful combination of the look of a home. With the kitchen and just the comfort, but also a beautiful, airy, open workspace. It looks incredible. I want to come and visit.
Please do. Yeah, like we pushed the boundaries. We've got a 3.6 metre stud height in here. We wanted volume.
Yeah.
So yeah, that had its challenges as well.
Did Pack Studio do the interior design as well?
Yes, they did. Yeah.
And did you do the build and the interior fit out?
We did everything.
Wow.
Yeah. So
because I mean that's I can just tell by the photos that mastery just definitely comes out in the joinery and the finishing on, and even the quite stunning light.
Yeah. Yeah. So everything, we handcrafted everything. We've got some fantastic guys in the company, and they really treated this building as if it's their own. In fact, they still think it's their own. But the light that you're talking about, one of our guys, Brian Reed, he took photos of the Wanaka skyline and then transposed them onto timber and jigsawed them all out, and they sit on top of a light that we made out of a Bodo timber. And it's quite spectacular. It's about 3 meters long, and it's got the full Wanaka skyline on it, which has a LED light that shines up between the mountain ranges.
It's an art installation.
Yeah, it is. It's pretty cool. Yeah, and we wanted to be able to have the opportunity to do that, and that was what our brief was to the architects as well. Let us show off or show what we can do. So when people walk into the building, it's not only feels good, but they get to see what we do on a day-to-day basis, and when we build people's homes.
It's a good concept because a lot of building companies, they build a show home, which is and then maybe have an office that the salesperson works out of. But this is a completely different concept where you've got your utility area, and all your office in there, but still very welcoming, I imagine, to bring clients in.
Absolutely. Yeah, we've had a really good response. We've been in here since May, and the people that we've brought through has been fantastic.
So what are you working on now? I imagine people. This has definitely piqued a bit of interest. But you got a few other passive house projects on the go?
We've just completed one. It's got its passive house certification down near Terrace. We're going through a design stage at the moment it's actually our own home. We're using Rafe McLean Architects, and we're building a passive house for ourselves as well. We've done it in the office, so you'd think you'd do it the other way around, but we like it so much that we'd like to live not only experience at a working environment, but also we'd like to live in a passive certified home.
Yeah, well, I can imagine people not wanting to go home out of that office.
I'll tell you what, it was -1 out there this morning, and it was 20 degrees in the office.
Yeah,
walking in, it's an absolute pleasure to come out of the cold into this working space.
And you're far from shut off. I should also mention that is half of it's beautiful glass. I mean, it's hard to not have a good view somewhere in wherever you are in Wanaka or Queenstown. So to respect that and make the most of those outlooks and the scenery, as well as having a really high performance envelope, is a bit of a challenge for the design.
Very much so. Yeah, yeah. Especially like the front window that looks at out towards the mountain ranges is 10.5 meters by 3 meters, so 10.5 meter opening width and 3 meters in height.
So that does a pretty good job of dispelling the myth of passive houses having small, pokey windows.
Yeah, that's right. And like it's another exciting thing that we're seeing, that we're getting a really nice mix of good architecture coming into the passive house design.
Yeah, absolutely.
And in the early days, and I'm probably guilty of it myself, when you thought about passive homes, you thought small, tight, rectangular boxes, small windows, smaller spaces. But some of the homes that we've built, even the passive certified homes, architecturally they're quite spectacular.
Yeah,
and it's quite exciting that you're getting that nice balance. And that was what the driver was behind this as well. We wanted to push the boundaries to see what we could do as a company around that passive house space and still achieve passive house certification with really good architecture.
Yeah. Well, I think you certainly achieved that. Well, all I can really do is encourage people to go and have a look at the photos. If not, go and visit Wanaka and go and check it out for themselves. I wish you and the team all the best for future projects. I think this is a great asset to you, but also the whole industry.
Yeah. Thanks very much, Matthew, and thanks for having us on board.
And that was Bryce Dunlop of Dunlop Builders in the stunning Wanaka, and great location, great office space. We'll put some links to the build. There's Dunlop Hub and the building that we're talking about, and you can see for yourself just how much of a nice place that looks to work, but also the surrounding environment there is very stunning. What do you think, Zach?
Well, I'm just drooling over these photos, so pardon me. They're pretty amazing. It's so gorgeous and clear. It's celebration of craft as well. And yeah, I mean it's awesome. Great interview. I was the connection between passive house practice, especially passive house construction, and pride in craft. It was just like it's like this was that exemplified that. From hearing about the initial kind of pathway that Bryce took to passive house practice, and that it was, basically this is a cold, they can get really cold, and he's looking for how to make homes that they build, how to make them warmer. And it sounds like that started with air tightness with the 17 projects that started, several years ago and has progressed to passive house. But that the notion of performance being a driver, and basically like just this pursuit of excellence in construction, and how passive houses just can be this really logical culmination of this journey. Not that it's an endpoint. I mean, I think that that journey is going to continue, but that really shone through in your conversation with Bryce.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a lot to add to that really, because I really enjoy hearing that story, which I've heard from a number of builders, of that reintroduction to building, finding that spark again, getting inspired and being proud of the work they do. I just think it's so inspiring that people can work, build a team doing something that they enjoy and that brings so much to other people and to visitors in this case, but also to future clients, benefits the environment both externally but also internally. and make a sustainable business out of that. I just think, what could be better than doing all that, doing good work and that you're proud of, and growing a business at the same time. I just think it's fantastic, and so great to hear of builders who get that. It's very easy for us, I think, as commentators and designers and people who spend time behind computers to be quite theoretical and look at the data and look at our spreadsheets and try and model these magic numbers in PHPP or Woofy or whatever we're using. But for someone who's on the tools and just really enjoying and seeing the fruits of their labor, I just find it really inspiring.
Yeah. It must be super gratifying. Another.
As I say, it's so nice. It's kind of nice. I mean, only part of the building is an office, but it's also kind of nice for them to hit that get that first as well. It's not an office building; it's more of a shed with a showroom attached. But it is an office space. There's a working environment in there, and I can well imagine that all the team really enjoy being there.
Yeah,
probably struggle to go home on some cold days.
Another thing that occurred to me while listening to the interview I think of folks who haven't yet done a Passive House training, and maybe you might have a comparison of like the preparation involved in studying for the lead exam or something like that, and they're really different activities. So, and I bring this up because Bryce mentioned the training that he's having his crew go through and stuff, and that he mentioned that what's the real reason he's doing that is the learning of building science and high performance building practice. And I think that's so if you've only been exposed to kind of the lead process where you're studying for an exam that's about the rules of the certification, right? Like learning all the different point systems and stuff and all the intricacies of that. And that's entire. And I've taken both the lead exam and also the CPHC exam. The CPHC experience is completely different. You're learning about the actual building science that's necessary for a Passive House practice, and the exam is you're being tested on that knowledge. Yeah. I haven't done the tradesperson training, but I imagine that's more so the reality there. So it's just a reminder, I think, of just what a great resource all of these trainings that are out there. I mean, they're time intensive, but it's not like getting a college degree. It's maybe a week, but they have real practical value, and it's not just like silly, I don't know, just flashcards and silly knowledge that you will forget.
No, it's on the tools doing build ups and talking about stuff, and I think it also speaks to the current gap certainly that we have here in our professional training. Because ideally they would be getting, people, both designers and builders would be getting some of that building science and some of that knowledge. But I know for a fact that it's just not in the curriculum at the moment. We're sort of pushing to make that happen and try and get that so that it is more common practice. But until it is, that additional Passive House training is so valuable for designers, but also builders, tradespeople, across the whole project. Very good. Inspiring stuff. We'll put some links in there. Definitely check out the images. Come and visit. It's worth a trip to New Zealand just to go down to Wanaka. It's a beautiful place. So
yeah, it looks amazing.
Come just to go to Wanaka. You won't be disappointed. All right. Now we mentioned a couple of things coming up. A couple of big things coming up are, of course, the Passive House Network conference. You're going to be there quite soon, isn't it, Zach?
Yeah, it's in Denver. So it's happening the week that this episode will hit. So we'll, a whole crew of Accelerator folks will be there. I'm really looking forward to the trip, seeing friends, making new ones. And there's a lot of exciting stuff happening. A lot of work around the rebuild after the big Marshall fire, and a lot of passive house work happening there. So anyway, it's going to be really great. And then the next
Colorado.
That's Colorado. Yeah, Denver, Colorado. And then the next month we'll be at FIASCon in Houston, and can't wait to see you there, Matthew. That's going to be pretty great.
Yeah, looking forward to that. Yeah. Looking forward to catching up with a few people I met in Chicago last year, but also welcoming Jesse Clark will be there from Australia. And as we talked about in the top of the show, really looking forward to diving more into how Passive House is being implemented in warmer climates and what we're doing to consider keeping cool and comfortable, and also dry and comfortable, and dealing to humidity and moisture in warmer climates. So really looking forward to that.
Yeah, definitely. And of course, every Wednesday at noon Eastern, we have a new Zoom gathering as part of Passive House Accelerator Live. And so we'll include a link so you can get information about those. Our Reimagine Buildings YouTube channel is active again for this fall season. Some new stuff there. So lots of stuff going on. And of course, you can check in with your local affiliate Passive House organization to access other local events.
All right. Hey, well, thanks, Zach. We'll be back again next week on the Passive House podcast.